that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. Tom Fennell, George Harvey. And we get on every week and talk about the news of energy and climate change. And this is derived from a blog called geoharvey.wordpress.com, named after me. I don't know how that happened, but you know. Geoharvey, GeoHarvey.wordpress.com. If you hear something that you want to look up, you can look it up there and look at the dates.
There should be a link that works.
There will. Can't guarantee it works.
Can't guarantee. Well, mostly they work.
Mostly they work. Sometimes they don't. And I will apologize. I don't have glasses today, so I'm unable to see the monitors in front of me to see what Tom's putting up for pictures. So I may be asking questions about that. Anyway, we should start. And our first day for our news is September 24th, and the first piece comes from The Ecologist. It is an opinion piece titled "Shame on Them, the Government's Nuclear Lies Exposed."
And there's a picture of the president lying with his nose growing.
Well, the problem with this is it isn't the president doing this.
No,
it's the
that's
UK
right,
doing
but
it.
I couldn't get the picture of the whole cabinet with their law.
Okay, there's no doubt about it. The UK government is spreading untruths about the price of renewable energy. Is it deliberate? One can only assume so, owing to the consistency of the pattern. And it's always in the context of supporting nuclear power over renewable energy resources. And you know, this is really something that I find the more remarkable with the passing of time. They want to put $40 billion, well, actually it's not, because the pound has inflated, but it's 26.5 billion pounds, putting together 2 nuclear reactors. And those...
This is Hinkley.
This is Hinkley.
Yeah.
And they're...
It's never going to happen.
I just don't see how it can happen. We will hear more about goings on in the UK in this broadcast, and as we do, we'll see more reasons why it probably won't happen. But here is something that our next item. Should we go on to the next item?
I'm just seeing if I have any takeaways from this one.
On this one? Poor Barack
Well, it's a good
Obama.
article. I remember the article.
He's being blamed for something that he isn't even associated with.
Yeah. It's still a good picture.
Yeah, well, you know. Okay.
No, we've talked about Hinkley before.
We've talked about it before.
It's just not economically sound, and yet it's moving
They
forward.
They want to pay Hinkley 3 times the going rate for power.
You know, that's nice if you can get it.
Hard to imagine.
I'd like to know the real story there. Who's going to be making money on that?
It's hard for me to imagine what the real story is. Anyway, in the United States, we have, one day, Hillary Clinton announced that she opposes the construction of the Keystone Pipeline. The next day, she released her energy infrastructure plan. The first item on the list was repairing and upgrading our existing pipelines. The words solar, wind, and alternative do not appear in the plan at all, and renewable only shows up twice. Do you suppose she should have a nose?
I think so. I think they pull this one on her. I don't think she expected that what she was going to say was what she wanted to say.
Well, who knows, you know?
Well, you know, everything is scripted, so.
Yes, I know. This, by the way, is from America Blog.
America
Blog, which is scripted, of course. Now, we go on to our next item, which
coming closer to home.
Coming closer to home. The Vermont Public Service Department released the public review draft of the 2015 Comprehensive Energy Plan. The plan emphasizes the importance of efficiency and conservation. Since the last CEP was published in 2011, Vermont has added 100 megawatts each of solar and wind power, that is solar PV, while power rates grew slower than inflation and in some cases went down.
Nice picture up there of Searsburg, our wind
Searsburg.
farm in Searsburg.
We've been there.
And I'm going to pull up another picture, and this is Hydro-Quebec, one of the many Hydro-Quebec installations.
Tom and I went to Searsburg, and we measured how loud the turbines were. And it turned out the guy we were talking to was 3 times as loud.
Well,
when we were standing next to the turbines.
You could hear the traffic going by, and the sound made by the wheels of the cars going by is louder than the windmills.
Yes, well.
And 5 miles away, you got a downhill section on Route 9, and the trucks with their Jake brakes shut the windmills off entirely.
I used to live on a mountaintop, and
in Tennessee.
No, I lived on a mountaintop in New Hampshire, and I could hear from the mountaintop in New Hampshire trucks on Route 91 in Vermont. And they were like 4.5 miles away. I could hear a diesel locomotive that was 7 miles away. And it would wake me up in the middle of the night.
Oh, boy.
Well, you know,
the diesel could wake you, not the whistle.
Not the whistle?
Yeah.
No, not the whistle. The sounds that you hear in the mountains are really kind of amazing.
They travel pretty far, don't they? Yeah.
But people get used to things.
Yeah.
And, you know, I got used to the diesel going by every spring when my windows would open up, and then I'd sleep through it for the rest of the summer. I got used to living in a dormitory in college where my window was about 250 feet from the Myrtle Avenue L.
Oh, I remember that.
Pardon me. I have a little bit of a little bit of the end of a cold going on.
Yeah, I had
here.
that last week.
And that was the L was about 250 feet from my house, from my room, and it went by every night, 4 times every hour. It was like camping out in a subway station.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Oh well. That was from Vermont Biz. And do we? Oh, we're going on.
We're coming in. Yeah, that's
CleanTechnica.
still part of it. There's a takeaway here that I like to mention.
What's that?
The Public Service Department is holding a series of 5 public hearings around the state in October to seek reaction and comments on its draft Vermont Comprehensive Energy Plan.
Yes.
So if anybody's interested, you can write and comment. There's a form, http://energyplan.vt.gov.
And there's some really important things there too. I mean, if you think about this, just for example, dams that already exist that were put up for flood control.
Flood control, and they work.
And they're there. The water is backed up. The rivers are stopped as they're going to be, and there's no electricity being generated. And
when they built it, that wasn't even an issue.
It wasn't an issue. But there's a woman named Lori Barg who I think lives in
Plainsfield? No, Mid River Glen somewhere. I know you mean.
She was behind those 2 dams that are being worked on. One in Townsend.
I think she sold
She sold those, but she did a research thing for the Department of Energy, U.S. DOE, and it turned out that you could get hundreds of megawatts out of just these dams that are in Vermont that are they're all over the country.
I'll explain quickly why they're even there.
Flood control.
Hartford and Springfield used to flood enormously every spring.
Right.
You can go to downtown Hartford in a place where the insurance companies are, and you can see the high water mark. It's like about 12 feet off the ground, and it's marked, high water mark.
Yeah, and
1948.
Yeah, and so what's the solution? Build a dam. All right, you've got a dam. It's a resource. You're not using it.
Well, there's probably about 20 of those dams on both sides of the river, New York. I mean, in Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire.
Yep, they're all
and like
over.
you said, they're just sitting there.
You're not going to make things any worse by putting electrical systems.
Not at all. Not at all.
So,
and the dams have provided some nice recreation areas, too.
Yes, they do.
So it was a good thing, all told, and now it's going to become a better thing because I'm sure every one of those things will be generating electricity.
Yeah, my recollection was that it was about 200 megawatts that you could get out of that.
That's significant.
It's significant.
I'd say half of the nuclear power.
No, it was 100 megawatts. I'm sorry. It's about half of Vermont Yankee.
All right.
A little more than half, as I recall. I should look that number up again. Our next item from September 25th This is an interesting
I
picture.
love this stuff.
This came from CleanTechnica. The University of Texas at Austin has let out word that a research team guided by Professor John Goodenough. I actually looked up the name, Goodenough.
It is. That's his name.
Yeah. Well, I looked it up. The pronunciation. You know, is it good enough
or
good no or
it's good enough? Huh?
Good enough. The man who invented lithium-ion batteries has come up with a new cathode material, leading to the development of a marketable sodium-ion battery. The new energy storage involves eldphyllite, a yellow-green mineral. And
Never heard of it before.
well, you know, the list of minerals that I don't know anything about is long enough that I don't know how many times it would wrap around the world.
Well, I'll explain. It was so named because it was found in the northeast rim of Eldfell, a volcano in Iceland.
Gosh. We need to know this. You will be tested later. Okay. Anyway, sodium-ion batteries, that's important because sodium ions are cheaper than lithium ions. And there's a lot of sodium around. There's not a lot of lithium around. Okay, also from CleanTechnica, we got this. In what's being referred to as the first utility-adopted solar sharing program, Yaloha and Green Mountain Power have partnered.
Yaloha!
Yeah, there you go. Have partnered to offer GMP customers the opportunity to go solar even if the panels go on somebody else's roof. Yaloha acts as a middleman between people who want solar and people who have places for panels.
This is a new concept.
Isn't it interesting?
This guy's got a roof.
Yeah.
Can generate more electricity than he can use.
That's right.
So this other guy's got a house, and they put
Absolutely.
them together, naturally taking a little bit of cut in the middle, and this guy's solar panels on his roof powers his own house and his other house,
Yeah.
as shown up there on the screen.
Yeah. Okay. Business Reporters sent us this. More than a quarter of the UK's electricity came from renewables last spring.
This is, UK. Yep.
Yep. Official figures show renewables accounted for 25.3% of electricity generated in the second quarter of 2015, up from 16.7% for the same period in 2014, and overtaking coal for the first time. Coal generating fell to 20.5% for the same period. And you know, it really kind of galls me. For all of the nonsense that's going on with renewable power in the UK, they're way ahead of the United States.
That's interesting too, isn't it?
Wow. Give me a break.
That's a very interesting point.
Yeah. So there it is. What do you got there? You got a picture of solar panels.
It's just solar panels.
Even I can see that.
Just generic solar panels.
Should we go on?
Can't dance.
Okay.
This one's a
Oh,
big.
this one is a big one. This is really
this one's a
interesting.
biggie.
Saturday, September 16th, we got this from CleanTechnica. Just at a time, some are calling for the use of the U.S. RICO laws to investigate and possibly prosecute those who may have been attempting to defraud us about the climate. We have found that Exxon was concealing its own science, predicting climate change. A look at the data shows their predictions were nearly spot on. That graph you're seeing is a graph of carbon emissions causing climate change. It was produced by Exxon climate scientists in 1981.
Bingo. And what makes this even a little more disastrous is other companies were going along with Exxon.
Yeah, other companies.
They knew what was going on.
They knew what was going on. And you know, you've got Senator Inhofe going into the Senate, throwing a snowball saying climate change is a big fraud. Well, there is a fraud, Senator Inhofe, and you're part of it.
Yeah, I'm afraid
At least
you're right.
that is my opinion, whether you know it or not. Okay. So I've ranted for what, about 8 seconds there?
Yeah, you didn't rant long enough.
I didn't rant long
couldn't
enough.
even get you up on the screen.
Well, one of these days, one of these minutes, Okay, from also from CleanTechnica, we got this. Based on estimates of the amount of excess pollutants released by 11 million cars, VW admitted to fitting with cheating software. Kevin Drum, who's a journalist from the West Coast, by the way, has come up with a rough estimate of a death toll. Worldwide, it may be that 3,700 people died because VW cheated. You know, this is something that professional medical people are going to pick this up. They're going to figure it out. But people were being killed because somebody felt like cheating on the emissions.
Well, that's exactly
And
what's
they were
happening.
cheating on the emissions only for one reason, and that was to make it look like the car was okay on emissions,
Yeah.
but let it be very peppy. So
Yeah,
peppiness was what killed those people. A desire for a car to be peppy.
Well, I got a diesel car and it's not peppy. And I can see, well, I remember renting one in Ireland.
Yeah?
That was. You
Really?
know, and I was really surprised. I mean, this isn't acting like a diesel, you know.
Ah.
It was going quite well.
And now you know why.
Now I guess I know why.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you're going to hear a lot about this for a
This
long
is going to
time
be
right now.
Who is it that's on the screen? Is he
Well,
holding his head
I'm
because
not
he's got a
sure
headache?
which Volkswagen executive it is, but yes, that's.
Is
it
he
could be the
holding his
guy that
head
just
like
retired.
because he's got a headache?
Well, he does.
VW has a headache. My prediction, would you like to hear my prediction on VW?
Yeah.
The company will go broke. It will go absolutely flat broke. It will the value of the stock will go to zero, and the various people who VW owes money to, which is going to include a lot of money for fines, are going to wind up owning the business, which is going to be kept open because they're going to make money.
It's a big business.
The German government cannot afford
They can't afford to
let that go, but VW.
They may run it for a while, like we did for General Motors.
Yeah.
But it's gonna go back into the market.
It's going to go back into the market, but it's going to be a very different company than it was when it decided it was going to cheat on these emissions, on the emission software.
Interesting. The article that this is based on had a headline, and I don't understand German, so I'll just speak it in English. Volkswagen kills kids.
Yeah, that was not a German headline. That was a phony German headline.
Was it really?
Yes.
Oh.
The VW turted babies.
Turted
Babies.
Yeah.
It's a mixed English and
Well, it
German.
refers to a Nestle marketing campaign in Africa where they said Nestle killed kids
Yes.
back in 1970.
And that was pretty nasty too. I mean, the stuff that people do for money is really crazy.
Isn't it really something?
Oh, it's just appalling. I wonder how many people would kill their own kids for money. It's just.
It's been done.
Yeah, I know it's been done. Okay, should we get out of that mire?
Moving right along.
Okay. World Magazine had produced an article saying the presidents of the United States and China have struck a bargain. China will implement a national cap and trade program requiring Chinese electric companies, iron, steel plants, other manufacturers to trade emissions credits beginning in 2017. The United States will make carbon cuts through existing or planned regulation. So China is giving up a lot, and the United States is giving up nothing.
That's what it looks
That's
like
what
now.
it looks like now. Yeah, this is exactly the charge that politicians in Washington were making at the last agreement, was that China was promising to do something in 2035, and it might not deliver until 2035 when the United States was actually doing something. Turned out the Chinese were already doing what they were promised to
Well,
do.
they seem to have a lot of local stuff going on. People are protesting. I mean, they're not happy with their capital being the most fog or smog laden city in the world.
4,400 people being killed in China every day by air pollution.
That's
Somebody
a significant
notices after
figure.
a while, you know. I mean, really, this is not a figure that I'm just making up. It's I've forgotten where that comes from. It comes from. It wasn't the World Health Organization, but it was a very important organization.
Well, I can believe it. I certainly can believe it.
I know we talked about that several weeks ago on the show. So, anyway, the United States is basically promising to do what it has already said it's going to do. The Chinese are going to implement something that they've already decided to implement. They've got to do this. So, you know, it's kind of like, I'm going to take an aspirin to fix my headache if you will
Take an aspirin too.
Maybe. Think about it. Okay.
Well, back to U.S.
Back
good
to
old
the
USA.
US. From CleanTechnica, the overall collective risk of cancer from exposure to 7 toxic air contaminants in California has declined by an incredible 76%.
That is incredible.
Since the comprehensive air quality regulations went into effect.
It shows it could be done.
In 1990, that's right. According to a new study from the California Air Resources Board, the worst offender is said to be diesel particulates.
Which is just what we were talking about with
Well,
Volkswagen.
not quite, because the problem with VWs was not that they were cheating on particulates, but that they were cheating on nitrogen oxides. But these particulates are a big problem. You know, I mean,
That's soot.
it's soot. It's when you see black smoke coming out of a diesel, that's the problem. And of course, Tom's Mercedes, which is 30 years old, by the way, and in my opinion does not smell like a French fry, but it certainly doesn't smell like diesel oil, is not a problem in that respect, because it doesn't put out soot. And it really doesn't.
I haven't noticed it anyhow.
No, I haven't seen any. I see you drive by often. I'd notice if that's the kind of thing I would notice. Okay, on Sunday, September 27th, from The Guardian, we got a study prepared by DIW Econ, a German institute for economic research, found that as a whole, countries that belong to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development have already decoupled their economic growth from emissions. This means they can grow without increasing greenhouse gas emissions. And this is a big deal.
I just saw a note that I made that goes back to the one we were just talking about.
Okay.
And it had the name of the guy who did the research here, but he says, as shocking and as horrible as Volkswagen's dirty diesel cheat was, the more concerning thing is that this is close to the norm within the auto world.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
other people are cheating too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was in fact, I think we had a comment on that on our last show. There was a guy who worked for we might not, I remember the comment. The guy worked for the EPA, and he said finding auto companies
That
cheating.
quote came from him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was a standard thing, you know, that they were doing constantly. And they caught Chrysler, and they caught GM, and they caught Ford. And he said the only companies that were not doing it were
the Japanese,
who, of course, don't make diesel engines. So maybe that's why they don't.
Maybe he didn't catch him.
Okay.
Interesting.
Getting back to the business of decoupling greenhouse gas emissions from economic growth, what this means is that we can grow economically without using coal, oil, or gas. And in fact, when you think about it, getting off of coal, oil, and gas is going to be an industry of itself, which is going to hire a lot of people.
I think in the long run, it's going to be very beneficial.
It's going to be very
50 years from now, people are going to look back at this and say, hey, you know, they used to burn oil.
Yeah, I know.
Can you believe it?
50 years from now, I think the world is going to be basically free of oil, gas, and coal. And people are going to look back at this period and say that's when everybody was employed by industries that were putting up solar, wind, and so forth. And with the marginal cost of power going down to very close to zero, and I think we'll probably be doing our transportation with electric vehicles and a lot more public transportation than we've got, those jobs eventually are going to disappear. I won't be alive when that happens, but
no,
those
the
jobs,
short run, there's going to be jobs.
in the short run, which means 50 years, there's going to be jobs. In the long run, those people who are going to come off of that, who are going to be retiring from installing all of that stuff, the number will decline. I think they can be poets because it's going to be cheaper to live. You don't need to take your daytime job anymore. Boy, am I dreaming. Okay. Monday, September 28th.
Got an interesting picture up here. Too bad you can't see it.
What's that?
It's a very interesting Volkswagen Beetle with an airplane engine attached to it.
Does it fly? Okay.
I would imagine on a highway it does.
Yeah, I would imagine it does, but I don't think I'd want to be anywhere around it.
But we're back talking about VW.
Bet it's noisy as all get out. A VW engineer warned the company about cheating over its emissions tests as early as 2011, a German newspaper reports. Separately, Bild am Sonntag said an internal inquiry had found parts supplier Bosch had warned Volkswagen not to use the software illegally. Volkswagen said they would not comment on what they called newspaper speculation.
How can they possibly comment?
They can't comment. But you know what? They're in trouble.
Oh, I
they
think
are
so,
in serious trouble. And my bet is that those newspapers, this newspaper speculation was in fact exactly what happened. There were people who knew about this, and there had to be people in the company who were saying, I don't think that's a good idea. And that's as far as you have to go to warn
this
them.
wasn't a simple engineering problem.
No, it was not.
They spent a lot of time and money figuring out.
They had to have somebody figure out how to detect the fact that the car was being tested.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not something that you do by accident.
Right.
Oh my gosh, this was a piece of fraud. And the sale of every VW that was sold with this stuff in it was a continuation of that fraud. So maybe the CEO of VW could be prosecuted for 11 million instances of fraud. Now, I put a note in here, and this came from Bloomberg. This is not something that I found in my regular searching. Relevant to this article, in a lunchtime address at New York University on September 10th, Deputy Attorney General Sally Quillian Yates rolled out a new blueprint for prosecutors across the United States. Their priority should be to hold individuals to account for corporate crimes, not just to impose big fines on companies.
We're going to talk about that one. As a matter of fact, that's the next one coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
this guy.
That was the one that I attached to this thing. And this was in Bloomberg.
Yeah.
And the situation here is the companies that are being prosecuted, they sometimes get out of paying huge fines and pay smaller fines instead.
Well, even if they were paying the huge fine, they're making more.
Yeah.
They make 30 billion. They pay a fine of 10.
Yeah.
And then they take 20 to the bank.
And what's happening here is that the Attorney General's office is saying, no, we're not going to do that unless the companies point the finger at whoever it was in the company who came up with and executed the plan.
So somebody should wear an orange suit for a while.
Yeah. And it's not going to be one person. It's going to be more than one person.
Well, they get away with it. It's a little slap on the wrist.
A little slap on the wrist. I think this is a good idea. Okay.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Next item from CleanTechnica, 21 new hydroelectric projects that will utilize already existing dam infrastructure in Ohio, West Virginia, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Mississippi are set to be developed following the closure of a senior loan facility between Free Flow Power New Hydro and Crestline Investors. It's the name of a company. They are expected to produce over 200 megawatts. Now, I want to point out 21 new projects are going to produce 200 megawatts. 200 megawatts.
280.
280?
That's what this one says.
Okay, well, I'm reading 200 on my screen, but that's okay. The point is, this is somewhere upwards of a third of the amount of power that came out of Vermont Yankee. It's reliable power. We do need a certain amount of what is called baseload power, although it's getting more and more clear that the amount we need is really very much smaller than people thought. These 21 plants are going to be producing, on average, less than 10 megawatts each. These are not big plants.
No, they're small.
They're not big.
No.
But they're all over the place. And this is something that the DOE, kind of not using big headlines, but about six or 8 months ago, came out with a thing saying, oh, by the way, our estimates about the amount of hydroelectric that we could get out of the United States were wrong. we can actually get about double what we originally thought. And the reason was because they had never considered the numbers of dams that were in for other purposes that could be utilized. And they had never considered the things like James Perkins' little green hydro thing, where he's taking power from areas where fish don't even live and running it down through a pipe with a big head and coming out to a small turbine. And you know, I used to tell people 6 weeks ago in the old days that I knew 5 different ways you could get power from hydropower that didn't involve dams. And
You mean like running a river?
yeah, that sort of thing. And 6 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I found 2 more. And so I was saying, well, I should say 7. And now, you know, here is the cleverly concealed before our very eyes number 8, which there are enough dams in Vermont that we could go to 100 megawatts or so, or more.
These dams are all over the place. They mention 8 states here, but I guess most of these dams are flood control dams.
They're mostly flood
probably
control.
Built by Corps of Engineers. They're just sitting there. The water's going over the dam.
Yeah.
Why not collect a little bit of energy from that
Absolutely.
water? It's there.
That's what we were
And
talking about.
And you don't have
before.
to build another dam.
You don't have to tell a fish that it can't go up the stream.
You don't have to displace the people who lived lived
Exactly.
behind the dam.
Exactly.
It's all been done
You
already.
don't have to produce a recreational area where you can go down and go out in a canoe and look down and see the top of a church steeple.
Yeah,
under
you can do that. Plumbing reservoirs like that
Yeah,
too.
right. Okay. On Tuesday, September 29th, we got this from an organization called, I believe it's Riot, R-Y-O-T.
RYOT, yep. I
It's
got
an
that.
opinion piece called "People Power Just Defeated Shell in the Arctic. Here's How You Did It." And it says, years ago, Shell paid billions of dollars for the right to drill for oil in the Arctic. Now the company is pulling out and has no plans to go back. It's a huge victory for everyone who took action, whether writing a letter or climbing a giant skyscraper in protest. And what we're seeing on the screen there is people who were hanging from a bridge, not by their necks, people who are hanging from a bridge with red and yellow banners kind of gleefully preventing a ship from passing underneath. The ship
Oh, is that what they were
drilling
doing
rig.
there?
Yeah.
I was wondering where you got that picture.
Yeah, and this was actually the picture was with the article, but it showed, which is why I know what it is. If I were just looking at this with my eyes and no glasses, I see yellow and red streaks on a gray background. The various people, and this was in Portland, Oregon, were just preventing Shell from doing its business. And finally, what happened was Shell Oil had a drilling rig in the Arctic, and the rig came up dry. So they just said, well, "Okay, we're out of here," and that was the end of that.
Well, this article had to do basically with the protests that were going against it.
Yep.
But the bottom line, I think Shell looked at it and said, "We're not making any money."
Well,
on
there
this."
is one thing that we should mention here, and that is one of the things that they said was that they were put off by the attitude of the U.S. federal government, which is trying to get people to move away from fossil fuels.
Okay.
Well, I got news for anybody who thinks, first of all, that is a political thing that's just being done for no reason, and that is that, like it or not, I know we've got a bunch of presidential candidates for the Republican Party who are saying that climate change doesn't exist. They're going to be changing their tune. They are going to be changing their tune.
Well, eventually they're going to have to.
You know, I've said this before, and the last time I said it, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. MSNBC did a survey of nearly 70,000 climate scientists who had published papers in peer-reviewed journals to find out how many of them were climate change deniers. Out of 70,000, there were four. Not 4,000, 4. And not 3%. It's not 97% say it's real and 3% say it isn't. It's 99.97% or whatever it is say it's real, and 0.0 whatever. And I believe, 4. And I believe that if I went out and queried 70,000 physicists, I would get more than 4 positive results if I asked, is it true that you believe you're the reincarnation of Isaac Newton? You're not laughing because you've heard that joke before. Tom has heard this probably on this show 3 times, 4 times.
So.
But the point is, this is not, some kind of thing that it's not. I had a friend of mine said it's a socialist conspiracy. Climate change is a conspiracy to try to get socialism to take over the world. And if you look at it, you discover nobody's going to take over the world on climate change. It just ain't going to happen because it means distributed power. And that means that the power is going into the hands of the people as individuals, if that's what they want to do. It's one of the most democratic things around. But the Republicans are getting money into their campaign funds from people who are saying, and by the way, you've got to deny, that this is a problem. And you can be quite sure of that. At least that's my opinion.
I wouldn't bet against it.
Okay.
We even know the names of some of the alleged perpetrators.
Yes, we know the names, and one of them, by the way, is Exxon, which has been denying climate change professionally, even though it knew that it was happening for years. And the money that they get for their profits, their income, their revenues, all depend on the sale of fossil fuels, which is going to be reduced because of climate change. And, I read a thing from one of the climate change deniers who had written a peer-reviewed paper saying there isn't any climate change. And he said, I'm so pleased to say that there isn't climate change going on, because if there is, it will destroy the economy of Russia. So who is in the same ballpark, in the same bed perhaps, as Russia? Well, in this respect, Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Koch Industries. Mm-hmm. Koch Industries has got something that it shares with Russia. How do you like that? And they're putting money into making sure that they are going to keep their profits, and so is Russia.
Well, the Koch money came from Russia. Daddy Koch was building oil refineries in Russia for, 40 years?
Yeah, I know. And he learned a lot about how the Russians organized things, and I think that's how the entire structure of the Heritage Foundation, the state policy network, all of that.
I never thought of that.
It's all organized like a bunch of party cells.
Yeah. I never thought of that, yeah.
And what are they trying to do? They're trying to concentrate all the power into a group of
very small number of very wealthy people.
You can count on your fingertips. Yep. They happen to be people who say, we're wealthy, instead of saying, we're just the people's commissars, And they do it through a series of interests that are free market. We want a free market. Yeah. You own it. You own everything. The means of production is owned by the people. But of course, there's got to be a government which takes care of the means of production. Okay, we have a free market that's owned by the people, but there's got to be a market organization that, and if you think about it, I said I was going to be on a rant. If you think about it, how do you control the free market? You control a vital sector. A single vital sector is enough to control the entire free market.
Well, one of those, and probably the best sector, is the information sector.
Yeah, but what about energy?
Well, energy too, yeah.
Information won't go without energy.
Yeah.
Nothing works without energy. And if energy can be concentrated into coal and oil and gas, you can regulate the entire slave market.
Yeah, you're thinking of the actual economy.
The actual
and I'm
economy.
thinking about how to influence the economy.
Yeah, I know, but you can regulate the economy by just kind of owning the right little pieces of the free market. It reminds me of Hetty Green.
Oh yeah,
Hetty Green. What does she do? She buys a big company, And then she says, I don't want to have that much money invested in a big company. I can control the big company by owning 51% of the stock. And she sells 49% of the stock. And then she says, but I don't want to have that much money invested in a big company that it's, for the value of 51% of the stock. I'll produce a holding company, and then I'll sell 49% of the stock in the holding company. And then she says, but I don't want to have that much money invested in a holding company to control that company. I can produce a second holding company and have it hold the holding company that holds the company. And by the time she was done, she had a pyramiding structure of holding companies, which is illegal today because of what she was doing. And she could control a railroad with an investment of $2,000. And that is what you do if you control the coal industry and the oil and gas industry with with those investments.
So she wrote the book.
She wrote the book with an investment of maybe $100 billion, which admittedly is not 2,000, but with an investment that is significant enough, you can control the entire U.S. economy because you have the energy. And there is nothing in the world that is more threatening than a solar panel on a rooftop when it comes to that particular way of doing business.
Hold that thought.
Yeah.
Hetty was also a miser, wasn't she?
She was a famous miser.
She lives in Bellows Falls, by the way, in case you don't know.
Oh,
her.
man. She is said to have spent days looking for a free clinic where her son's infected leg could be taken care of. And she finally found a doctor, because they would say, but you've got lots of money. You don't need to get this free. We're not going to do this for you. We're going to reserve our medical practice to people who really need to have it done free. Finally, she came to a doctor who said, I can't turn you away. This boy's leg has to be amputated or he's going to die.
Oh, wow.
He resented that for a long time.
I would imagine. I would imagine.
Okay, should we move on?
I think we should move on.
CleanTechnica sent us this special delivery. Actually, it was something I found in my review of Google searches. Deutsche Bank analysts say China may increase its 2020 solar power target to 150 gigawatts.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. From the current target of 100 gigawatts, which, by the way,
it's also a lot.
Was recently pushed up to 100 from the original target, which was 13. China also proposes a competitive power dispatch that prioritizes the emissions-free, near-zero marginal dispatch cost of renewables, which would reduce carbon emissions by approximately, not a big figure, it's just 200 million tons a year. And by the way, that's tonnes, the metric tons. Yeah, so tons. It's 240 million tons, T-O-N-S. This is from CleanTechnica. That is really impressive. And there they are talking, is that right?
Yeah, that's
on the White House
That's
report?
she and...
What's his name?
Huh?
The guy with the nose.
The guy with the nose.
President Obama, who I think I probably like better than a lot of people do. I don't think that he's a saint, but I think that I like him better than a lot of people do. Okay, from Utility Dive. What in the world kind of name is that?
I don't know.
The Vermont Public Service Department has released the state's 2015 Comprehensive Energy Plan for public review.
Which we already talked about.
And has scheduled 5 meetings in October to take comment. The plan reaffirms Vermont's goal of meeting 90% of the state's energy needs through renewable sources by 2050, with emphasis on microgrids, which is why I put this in.
Okay.
Yeah, because
something's coming.
Yeah,
it's inevitable.
Yep, and there's the next item up, which is in Australia. And maybe we should take a look at the view from Hogback Mountain. I used to live on a mountaintop in New Hampshire. I mentioned that.
Yeah, you've talked about that.
And the local politicians decided they wanted to assess the property differently. We had a view that was a lot like that.
So that's the view from Hogback, huh?
That's the view from Hogback. Our view was very similar to the view from Hogback. Not as wide. Hogback, you're talking about a view that is almost 180 degrees wide, and ours was only about 110. But nevertheless, one day my father got a thing in the mail saying, here's your tax bill. it had been increased from $4,000 to $12,000.
No kidding.
And the reason was because they appraised the view at $400,000.
You're kidding me.
No, I'm not.
They taxed the view in New
They
Hampshire?
were taxing the view. Well, not exactly. That kind of fell through on review. It didn't go, but nevertheless. Our next item, Wednesday, September 30th. This is from a publication called One Step Off the Grid. Believe it or not.
I do.
I'm so pleased to have your vote of confidence. Western Power, the state-owned company that operates the grid in the southwest corner of Western Australia, may take some communities completely off the grid so it can save money on costly network upgrades and extensions. Why don't you roll that down a little bit, Tom, so people can actually see what that town looks like.
See the town, yeah.
See the town.
Looks so much like an American town,
It
really.
does, yeah,
Except the cars are on the wrong side of the street.
Well, Tad Montgomery sent me an email, he said, and pointed out not only were the cars on the wrong side of the street, but the people were walking backwards.
I didn't notice that.
And I said, I don't think this is in Australia. I think it's down on Cape Cod.
This is the town of Margaret River.
Yes, where they try to put people off by fooling them, and they have
So
reviews.
they went backwards down there, huh?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Okay.
There's a picture of where it's happening down in the southwest corner of Australia.
That's the map,
There's the
which
map.
Tom had wanted to show everybody before I showed them the.
I did a little bit of checking.
Yeah.
Australia is about the same size as the continental U.S., not counting Alaska.
Yes.
Very close to the same.
Very close.
We have 14 times as many people.
Right. And they have long distances to put out power lines on.
That's the whole point here.
Yeah.
There's too many miles between people.
That's right. They are considering up to 10 standalone systems using solar batteries and backup diesel for communities in that area. So basically what they're saying, it's cheaper for us, the utility, to set you people free.
So we're not going to be even collecting money from you anymore.
Well, I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they're probably going to gather money
Somebody's going to
out of the
maintain the
local
lines
thing.
or something like
But
that.
you know what's going to happen here? They're going to have their books open because they're state-owned. They're going to have to be showing what the profits are. These people are going to be having electric power from a system where the marginal costs are going to zero, which means that they're probably going to be having their costs go down, and at the same time, solar power being something that you can count on coming on at least a little bit every 24 hours, this whole system is likely to become more reliable. And I guess we should, we can go into the next item.
Let's.
BHP Billiton, the world's largest mining company, did an analysis of climate change and issued findings in a report. The company says it believes climate change is real and that action will be taken. In fact, the introduction calls for an agreement to restrict global warming to 2 degrees. This is a really interesting idea for a company to come up with.
It's just a big company.
And they're saying,
And by the way, this Billiton is partly owned by Shell.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's the largest.
Mining
company in the world. And a couple of years ago, they actually spent quite a few millions of dollars upgrading a harbor, which is the largest coal shipping harbor in the world, so that it would withstand worse storms that they were expecting from climate change. I mean, this is all real.
So they know what's going on.
They know what's going on.
Well, these people admit it.
They're admitting it, and they're saying, yeah, well, maybe 2 degrees would be a nice figure. Do you suppose they got that figure from somebody who had already figured it out?
I don't think so.
Oh, no, they probably came up with it on their own. Well, if they did come up with it on their own, they're agreeing with a lot of
There's a takeaway.
left-wing hippie organizations that have been dreaming about how climate change is real between puffs of whatever they were smoking. No, this is a serious problem, and we've got to start dealing with it. And here is BHP Billiton, which is one of the biggest coal mining companies in the world, in addition to everything else. The interesting thing is, though, they can't shake this desire for more money, they say. And by the way, we think that the uranium we own should be used as fuel.
Oh,
Well, here we go. What do you got there, Tom?
but just a little quick takeaway. As far as failing to improve energy access for the world's poorest people, burning coal contributes to hundreds of thousands of premature deaths each year due to air pollution, and is the single biggest contributor to climate change, pushing people around the world deeper into poverty.
This is what BHP Billiton says.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the World Health Organization says hundreds of thousands a year. Would you believe 10,000 a day?
Wow.
Yeah, 4,400 people every day in China alone. Now, those two figures came from two different organizations, but as I think about it, they're probably losing more than 4,400 every day in India alone. And between them, that's approaching 9,000 a day. And that means that in the rest of the world, it's not another 1,000 a day. I would believe that close to 1,000 a day are dying in the United States.
Well, we've seen numbers suggesting things like that.
Yeah. Very sad. It's,
Well, there's just second order consequences. People did, if they thought about them, like Exxon, they didn't mention them.
no, they didn't mention
And most
it.
people didn't think about them at all.
Yeah, that's right.
See, you finish a cigarette, you throw it away.
That's right. Yeah, you finish breathing the pollution that comes from somebody in Ohio, you can throw it away, right?
Well, yeah.
Whatever isn't trapped in your lungs. Okay, our last item for the day comes from Solar Server, and this is a hopeful little piece. Solar energy pricing is at an all-time low, according to a report from Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, driven by lower installed costs, improved project performance, and a race to build projects ahead of a reduction in a key federal incentive. Utility-scale solar PV power sale agreements are averaging just 5 cents per kilowatt hour.
And this is long-term contracts you're talking about that people are getting
Long-term
into.
contracts.
From this article, they've been as low as 3.1 cents in 2014.
Yeah,
So-
I believe that.
And then the other thing that's happening is the capacity factor is improving. They're getting more energy out of the existing things. And
Yes.
we've talked about some software that does this.
Yes,
It maximizes the.
As a matter
that
of
was
fact-
mostly for wind, but I'm sure they're doing it for solar
they're
as
doing
well.
things like that for software. As a matter of fact, this week we have a guest who is going to be talking about solar trackers and a reduction
Okay.
in price for solar trackers.
That would be good.
So, yep. And that is the material that we have for the week. We still have a couple of minutes left.
and the guest isn't here yet.
Our guest is not here yet. So, Tom, have you got any extra pictures you want to show?
I probably do. I'm sure I do, and I'm sure they're in my phone
Or is
drive.
there something that you would like to talk about?
Well, let's see if I can't pop up some pictures. I'll let you
In
talk.
the meantime, I'll rant on.
I'm going to put you on here. You talk, and I'm going
Okay,
to try and
look at
find
this.
some
I've
pictures.
got a captive audience, people who are couch potatoes and haven't made it up to turn me off. Yeah, the stuff that I've been seeing about the price of solar power and the price of wind, particularly wind power. And this is also true of biodigesters, the power from biodigesters. You know, at the time that Vermont Yankee was trying to sell power to Vermont, trying to get Vermont onto a new contract, and they said, we'll give you a price you can't refuse. 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour. The cheapest power source for Vermont was a biodigester that belonged to the Vermont Electric Co-op, as I recall, and it was selling power to Vermont at a rate of 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Now,
I don't think Yankee was happy with that.
no, they weren't. But you know, I mean, they were underbid by Hydro-Quebec. Yankee had a history of really kind of disingenuous behavior and a lot of stuff that turned people off. But on top of everything else, the state of Vermont had a really good reason to go to a different company, because Hydro-Quebec's prices were only about, well, they were 6 cents instead of 6.5. Nevertheless, the price of wind power has gone down to a point where in 2014 it was 3.2 cents on an average PPA, power purchase agreement. This is a long-term power purchase agreement. 3.2 cents. And then solar has gone down to an average of 5 cents, and natural gas has gone down to an average of 6.5 cents.
So the trend is downward.
The trend is downward from the low price of natural gas. What does this tell you? There were a few things that appeared in the news today, and this is after what we're reporting, and we'll talk about it next week. But
access is denied.
The head of one of the U.S. utilities said that he believed that there would never be another gas-powered peaking plant built in the United States after 2020 because the price of the power that it produces is just too high.
Okay.
And there was another one that came out which said that I think it was one of the utilities did a study of solar power and came to the conclusion that if you had a grid in which 50% of the power came from solar, you would not need batteries for that. If 50% comes from solar, then 50% comes from something else. And you could run a grid of that type by using basically
solar during the day,
and the
something
other stuff
else
at night, and demand response and things of that nature, where the grid is operating in a way which is smart. And we're moving into a new age in which we can get 100% of our power from renewables. Have you found what you want, Tom?
I can't find it. Access is denied.
Access is denied. Tom's computer is denying him access. So I think what we should probably do is wrap it up and say good night to everybody, or good morning as the case may be.
Let me put us both on here.
Yep. So
okay, we're here.
We're here. We're here. We're not here. See you later. It makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.